Last regular season was pretty run-of-the-mill for the Bucks. Giannis was dominant, Chris as consistent as ever, and the team as a whole posted an elite record. Couple of differences though. Compared to the prior 2 years, for one, they had a third star in Jrue Holiday, someone who was able to assume a lot of the playmaking role, take on some shot creation, and provide elite one-on-one defense. They also weren't the number 1 seed at the end of the year, which led to them kind of being forgotten about as a contender out east, with Philly overperforming and Brooklyn debuting a big three of some of the most iconic names in basketball history. And you could say that all 3 of these differences worked in Milwaukee's favor as they ended up winning the Larry O'Brien Trophy. So that begs the question, what's next for the Milwaukee Bucks? This offseason was pretty uneventful for the Bucks. I mean, pretty much this team is just going to be running it back this year. There were no acquisitions via trade. Like last season, they made a big acquisition via the trade market in adding Jrue Holiday. They didn't have their draft pick this year, I don't believe. And in terms of signings, this is where it does get a bit interesting. They signed Rodney, Hood, and George Hill. George Hill is about 35, but he's still able to provide a lot of value to contending teams off the bench mainly. And Rodney Hood's always been known as a scorer. Definitely a microwave type of scorer off the bench who can get you a lot of points in very small amount of minutes. He was injured last year, I believe, for most of the season, so hopefully with health, Rodney can provide a lot of scoring off the bench for the Bucks. In terms of losses, they didn't lose anybody via trade because they didn't make any trades, but in free agency, they did lose 2 valuable pieces. One being PJ Tucker, who provided a lot of defense and just flat out versatility for the Bucks. I believe they acquired him in a mid-season trade with the Rockets when the Rockets were just basically offloading everybody. We really saw his value on full display in the playoffs in the postseason, especially against the Suns. Him being able to guard one-on-one and not be afraid of guarding anybody one-on-one because PJ is just that versatile. From time to time, he could take on Aiden in the post. From time to time, he had to switch on CP3, who gave him buckets a lot of the time, but he did put on an effort, and he had his fair share of guarding Devin Booker. But they lost him, so that's kind of a hole that the Bucks are going to have to fill internally. And they also lost Bryn Forbes, who was kind of a revelation for the Bucks as a marksman off the bench. He always had shooting potential in San Antonio, but it didn't really come to full fruition as much as it did last season for the Bucks. His shooting was instrumental for them last regular season and for a lot of the postseason. So now taking a look at the current personnel, the depth chart is going to be pretty much the same. They have Jrue and Dante as their 2 main guards. You got to remember the Bucks went without Dante for most of their playoff run, so he's like a technical addition because he didn't really play for them in the playoffs. So it's going to feel like we haven't seen Dante DiVincenzo play forever. So I assume he should be healthy going into next season, so that's a W. They also have Pat Connaughton and Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague didn't play too much for the Bucks last year, but he made some impact in the regular season. So yeah, consistency from last year in the backcourt. At the forward position, they have their 2 all-stars in Giannis and Chris. Adding Rodney Hood, I project him to really be that scoring 6th man for the Milwaukee Bucks this year. And I think Thanasis is actually going to get a lot of minutes off the, not a lot of minutes, but a good amount of minutes off the bench. He played the most he has for the Bucks last season because he's been there for 2 or 3 years. Last season, he got the most playing time. I think Budenholzer really started to trust him on the defensive end. He's somebody who really flies around on that end, really competes hard, and he's pretty versatile. So with the loss of PJ Tucker, I think Thanasis is going to have to really fill in a lot of those defensive responsibilities that Tucker left behind. And at the center rotation, they have their stretch rim protecting 5 in Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, who kind of was a revelation to some extent. We've always known Bobby Portis could be a score-first big man. That was his reputation going into the season, so I kind of questioned his pickup for the Bucks because he's been known, before this year, he was known as a subpar defender. He really kicked it up on the defensive end, which earned him a lot of trust from Budenholzer in the regular season and in the postseason. And he's a fan favorite, so it's cool to see him finally land somewhere where he feels belong. So my thoughts on the roster, this is going to be a big theme for them: continuity. Unlike the defending champions before them, the Los Angeles Lakers, my Lakers, the Bucks will be going into next season with the same roster for the most part. The Lakers, after winning the championship, didn't bring back their two rim-protecting, athletic, rim-running centers in JaVale and Dwight Howard, two players that were instrumental in their play style, and they opted to add more so of stretch and playmaking five in Marc Gasol, and one of the best scoring sixth men in Montrezl Harrell, and both of those additions didn't really work out for them last season. Those weren't the main reasons the Lakers didn't win the championship, but they were contributing factors. So unlike the Lakers, the Bucks are actually basically running it back with virtually the same roster from last season. Their starting lineup will be exactly the same, and their core bench players still remain. But the two bench replacements I kind of already talked about, the loss of all-purpose wing PJ Tucker and sharpshooter Bryn Forbes, will kind of be significant, though they were able to add a veteran shot creator in Rodney Hood, who might be able to serve as a great spark plug off the bench if he's afforded with good health. I also think that the Nasas can make up for some of the defense lost with PJ Tucker. Like I said, very athletic, competes very hard, and is very versatile. I think he might be due for some more consistent 10th man minutes this upcoming season. I also want to talk about the idea of this being an asterisk championship. Some say that the Bucks are fools for running it back with basically the same team because this was an asterisk chip for them. That they faced an injury-riddled Nets team in the second round, Kevin Durant's toe being on the line, facing the Suns in the finals, yada yada yada, but I disagree. The Bucks also lost a huge piece of their rotation for the entirety of the playoffs in DiVincenzo, and Giannis suffered a ridiculous, just nasty looking injury to his leg in the conference finals, but was able to overcome it. So they've gone through their fair share of turmoil as well. Yes, the Bucks were lucky to face KD virtually by himself, but every NBA championship team in history has won it partially due to luck. Also, the Bucks have put themselves in position year in and year out to be champions, but just folded in the playoffs repeatedly. After this successful finals run, this core of Drew, Chris, and Giannis should have the confidence to expect to see themselves in the NBA Finals once again. And finally, I want to talk about Giannis. It seems like I've gone this whole video without talking about arguably the best player in our league right now. As of right now, he has asserted himself as the best player in the league. Similar to when Kawhi kind of took that throne when he led the Raptors to their championship. And speaking of confidence for the Bucks as a whole, I think this championship run will do wonders for Giannis going forward. Of course, being at the level of player that Giannis is, he probably always believed he was capable of being the best player in the league and believed that he was capable of holding that crown. But I think now he finally knows it. He's experienced it firsthand. I think he knows he has the crown now and doesn't want to give it away. Looking forward to next season, like I said, the Bucks starting lineup should 100% be the same. Drew and Dante in the backcourt, Chris and Giannis running the forwards, and Brook Lopez down low. Their record, I think, will be around 57-25. In the past couple of years, they've really pushed to get 60 wins and get that one seed, and it hasn't really worked for them. Last season, they weren't the one seed, and they ended up winning the chip. So I think they finally realized that there isn't that much value. There's definite value in the regular season and getting an elite record, but isn't as necessary. I think they've seen that they can be successful without holding the number one seed. So I expect them to get the second seed behind either the Brooklyn Nets or maybe some Eastern Conference team kind of shocks the world like the 76ers did last year and gets that number one seed. In terms of ratings, I expect them to have a top 5 offensive rating like they did last year and like they've done for the past 3 years basically, because they always have a hyper efficient offense, and I think their defensive rating will be comfortably in the top 10. I am projecting them to lose in the Eastern Conference Finals though to the Nets, because I think the Nets are my preseason favorite to make the NBA Finals. But I definitely think it will be a great series. I just think they do have a bit too much firepower, and I think a full season playing together will do wonders for the Nets. And especially James Harden, I think he has a lot to prove because he still hasn't won that ring. So I think his level of player is going to ascend to another level, even though he posted like several career highs last year. I think he's really gonna realize that his window for winning a championship is tightening, so I think he's going to be hungry to get it this year, and I think that will drive the Nets to the NBA Finals over the likes of the Milwaukee Bucks. With that being said though, they're obviously contending. Why would a defending championship team not be contending? Giannis and the Bucks are the defending champions, despite how you and the rest of the Instagram commenters feel about the legitimacy of their path. They're the defending champs, and they should go about this upcoming season feeling like it. They'll have a target on their backs for sure though. In my opinion, it's a two-team race for Eastern Conference supremacy between them and the Brooklyn Nets. Most people think it's a foregone conclusion that Brooklyn will make the NBA Finals this year with a full season of camaraderie. So, I guess, again, the Bucks are being overlooked just like last year. Only time will tell this season if there will be a similar outcome.